want to talk about individual issues, we are talking about the industry average. And we are stating and noting that both cooperators and CAA have already made a pledge to bring it down. We are providing new licenses for medical clinics and fines already being levied. And we provided new powers to Fiscal so that we can enforce and ensure that those savings are transferred to the public. And the public have means and ways to go to make those complaints official so that we can make certain that they're all being protected.
Speaker, I have no hesitation in standing in my place right now and saying the government broke their promise on reducing the return on equity that basically produce for the profits of insurance companies. Drivers were promised that the government would take the tough steps needed to bring down rates. Instead, the Liberals did break that promise. Drivers were told the government would heed the advice of the auditor. Instead, the Liberals ignored that advice, Speaker. Drivers were promised that rates would go down. Instead, many drivers with clean records are seeing their rates climb drastically. Does the Premier think that this is delivering results?
So, Mr. Speaker, achieving reduction in the premiums is giving results. Achieving reductions in their claim costs is enabling those premiums to go down. And the member is making reference to ROE at a benchmark of 11 or 12%. The fact of the matter is those insurance companies are receiving much less at about 3%. So that's not the issue. And there is a hotline for an individual who feels that they're being discriminated against or caused to receive harm. There's a hotline that they can call to ensure that they get the best value and the best results. But, Mr. Speaker, for the member opposite to suggest that we haven't maintained or kept to our promise, the facts are we are delivering on those results. We have initiated the changes. We provided more powers to Fiscal, and we are acting on the very initiatives to champion and protect consumers, Mr. Speaker.
New question, the member from Cambridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Premier. Premier, we know that your government is fond of having conversations when they suit you, but you ignore conversations when they don't. For example, the House is well aware that your government didn't care about conversations when it came to siting power plants in communities that didn't want them in Oakville and Mississauga. But when it comes to email conversations between backroom political operatives about how to spin the power plant scandal and intimidate members of this legislature, there are conversations aplenty. When the Premier was called to Justice Committee earlier this year, she said she wanted to be open and accountable for all conversations. But now, in the position to act, she prefers to not have these conversations with the committee to find out about this intimidation.
Question?
This has been dragging on for months, Premier. Can you tell this House right now that you will expand the scope of the Justice Committee to investigate these kinds of intimidation?
Mr. Speaker, we've addressed this several times in the House, and I think your ruling has been clear. But, Mr. Speaker, you know, I couldn't help but listen to the opposition earlier talk about anniversaries. And today, actually, Mr. Speaker, is the anniversary of a press release put out by Jeff Yanisek Saturday, September 24th. And this is what it says, Mr. Speaker. The only way to guarantee this power plant does not get built is to elect a Tim Hudak Ontario PC government. A Tim Hudak government will cancel this plant. And, Mr. Speaker, in a few days from now, we're going to have another anniversary of the famous YouTube video where we got to see the Leader of the Opposition stand up and say that if he was elected Premier, it would be the end of that plant, Mr. Speaker. It would be done, done, done.
Mr. Speaker, while the Premier loves a good conversation, the government House Leader is a man of a few words. And I find it passing strange, Mr. Speaker, that the Premier ducks behind the hedges, she sends her House Leader out to take the fire. On September 18th, our House Leader called for unanimous consent to expand the scope of the Justice Committee, and the government House Leader said no. On September 19th, the member of Whitby Oshawa called for unanimous consent to have conversations about developmental services, and the government House Leader said no. And just yesterday, the member from Timmins, James Bay, called for unanimous consent to expand the scope of the Justice Committee again, and the government House Leader said no. He sat there while we asked for conversation, surrounded by dozens of Liberals, and said no, no, no.
Shameful.
The people of Kitchener Centre deserve better than a doctor no. Premier, will you look to your left, walk 8 feet over to your House Leader, and have a conversation about accountability in your government?
Mr. Speaker, let's talk about...
I will look to each individual members now. I would ask also the government side not to do the same. Government House.
Mr. Speaker, let's talk about accountability on the other side of the House here. April 16th, 4 opposition candidates invited to testify at the Justice Committee, including PC candidates Jeff Yancey and Churchill. They all declined. April 30th, Tim Hudak is asked to testify. He declines. Backup witnesses Yancey and Churchill also declined. We then invite PC candidate Marianne DeMonte Whalen. She accepts and is scheduled to testify. Then, Mr. Speaker, surprisingly calls back a few hours later to cancel. May 2nd, Yanisik, Churchill, and DeMonte Whalen are called to testify. Yanisik tells the clerk to stop calling, and the other two do not respond. May 7th, Tim Hudak is once again invited to testify.
Thank you. Your question, the member from Trinity Spadina.
My question is to the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure. Yesterday, we all had to endure the sight of politicians from all 3 levels of government fighting to claim political credit for a subway extension in Scarborough. The people of Scarborough aren't interested in which rooster can crow